Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Listen, as a film critic, the one thing you've got to be careful of on an occasion like this one is that it doesn't run quite as long as the Oscars. Okay, and we're going to have people coming down the red carpet, no Joan Rivers to interview them, however. And by the way, thank you to Reverend Taylor for making the Nixon Library available for the Prager bar mitzvah. And by the way, for the fountain pens, and I know fountain pens very special to Dennis, for the fountain pens and the neckties and the wallets and all those other things, there will be large boxes that we can get to all of that. First, let me introduce the guests who will make this evening the very memorable occasion that it will be. First of all, the man who makes the Dennis Prager Show possible every day, other than Dennis, the executive producer of that show, Allan Estrin. And you didn't think he looked like that. You didn't. That's the real Allan Estrin. I think you're right here. That's fine. And next, Dennis's oldest friend and collaborator, and the rabbi of the Synagogue of the Performing Arts, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin. And from the psychiatric faculty, this is not a joke, of the UCLA School of Medicine, regular guest and participant on the Dennis Prager Show, Dr. Stephen Marmer. And a great American, truly, a former special assistant to President Nixon, somebody who has shown that it is possible to function in the worlds of politics and media and writing and be an example of class in all of them, Bruce Herschensohn. And an agent to the stars. This is not a joke. Somebody who has the privilege of being the agent behind some of the very best and some of the very worst radio talk shows in the United States. Dennis's agent, George Hiltzik. And finally, Dennis, I have the great privilege of following Dennis in the lineup at KRLA, and I have the great privilege of leading up to another one of the finest radio talk show hosts in the country, somebody who had a role actually in building this library. We'll hear more about that a little bit later. And somebody who is so tremendously proud of the good start by his Cleveland Indians, Hugh Hewitt. And finally, the man of the hour. That's right. And his father's name is? Right. We have the privilege of welcoming the bar mitzvah boy, Shmuel Nehemiah ben Menachem, otherwise known as Dennis Prager! We're doing it in the order. All right. To move this program along a little bit, we're going to hear from each of these individuals and from all of us who have had some role and some significant contact with the man of the hour, with Dennis Prager. But I was told at the outset that that one of the things that we needed to do was to try to, because so many of us are enthusiastic listeners to the Dennis Prager Show every day. We love it. We love the style of it. We love the content of it. So I was told that one of the things that needed to happen was to make people feel comfortable who are used to listening to Dennis on the radio every day. What we're going to do first is we're going to have a little bit of a special guest for you. A 93-year-old academic, Professor Harvey Einbinder from the Sorbonne, who is going to be speaking to us with a bad phone connection for about 40 minutes. Can we... just to make everybody feel like you're actually listening to the real Dennis Prager Show. Four very special guests before we get up and hear from our very first presenter tonight. First of all, we've talked about a number of people who make this evening possible. Of course, most of all for Max and Hilda Prager, who really make this evening possible. But somebody else who plays a paternal role in all of this is the CEO of the company that not only keeps KRLA on the air, but keeps fine radio stations all across this country on the air, also syndicates great programming like Dennis Prager, Hugh Hewitt, Michael Medved. It's a great company called Salem Communications. The CEO, Ed Atzinger, who is a visionary in the world of media, committed to values and quality and conservative principles. Ed Atzinger, thank you very much for being here. And you may not know this, but Los Angeles really is the most competitive radio market in the world. Not New York, LA, because of the number of strong stations. The guy who runs KRLA and keeps it going and makes it possible, the general manager of KRLA, who's here tonight, Terry Fay. Terry? And then somebody who is part of the KRLA lineup, who is actually on a little bit after the rest of us, but an indispensable part of the KRLA lineup. He's built a tremendous following among listeners to our radio station. You hear him every night on AM 870 from 9 to 11 p.m. Kevin James. Thank you, Kevin. And one more person I'd like to introduce, and this is not supposed to be in the program, but I couldn't resist. Somebody who survived 3 years, some very challenging years, as the producer of the Dennis Prager Show. And after working for Dennis, she felt she was ready to work with anyone. So right after that, she took on Saddam Hussein as an officer in the United States Navy. She's done 2 tours in Iraq for all of us. Lieutenant Lori Zemet. Lori! A little bit later tonight, she'll be available to compare and contrast Saddam and Dennis. But first up, Allan Estrin. Now, people know Allan Estrin as the producer of the Dennis Prager Show. You hear his voice on the show from time to time, usually when he's scolding Dennis about something appropriately. But a lot of people don't know that Allan is also a distinguished author in his own right. He has written recently with Joseph Telushkin, who's up here. They've collaborated on a fascinating mystery novel. He has written a novel or a book about Hollywood. It's very unusual for radio producers to also be book authors. But Allan is also a distinguished film writer. A lot of people don't know that. He first got to know Dennis when they collaborated on writing a very popular documentary film that I know a lot of you have enjoyed enormously, a film called For Goodness Sake. How many people here have seen For Goodness Sake? A bunch of you. Okay. This was a film about goodness, and they found originally, this is not a joke, it's true, they found originally the perfect narrator to introduce their film about goodness, somebody who everybody understood had solid values, was beloved by all Americans, and would absolutely do credit for the ideas they put forward in the film. And they filmed the film with this narrator. His name was O.J. Simpson. Now, this particular film was prepared for release just before the White Bronco. And so back to the editing process. And Allan, who did you get to?
We didn't get anybody, we just cut it out.
You just cut it out. But truly one of the great collector's items, I am sure, would be...
It's not available.
Not available, Allan Estrin says, is the director's cut with OJ of For Goodness Sake. Now, for Dennis's sake, Allan Estrin.
Thank you. Michael, did you say this was Dennis's bar mitzvah? I thought I was here for a circumcision. But it's okay. It's all right. I'll go with the bar mitzvah.
Muslims do it at age 13.
Hey, Dan, I've got the microphone. You don't. Cool. Dangerous. How much time, where's Pam? How much time did we say I have? What was it, 30 minutes? 40? Or the weekend, whatever this. You know, I just got an idea for a show. I want to tell you about this. I'm going to stop the roast for a second because the show comes first. That's our motto, right? The show first. So I'm interrupting my own presentation here because I have a good idea for a show. Call in and tell us what you would say to your coworker or boss if you knew you wouldn't be fired. Dennis, write that down. Now, this is what I want. Believe me, I'll savor this. Do me this favor, this honor. I would like an 800-person chorus to say on 3, Dennis, write that down. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Dennis, write that down. Forget it. Actually, Dan, forget it. Forget it. It's really not a great idea. But do what I do when you come up with your goofier ideas, or ideas we've done 4 times already. Pretend to write it down. Now, here's my issue. Here's my issue. Most people endure petty slights and humiliations at the office. Everybody deals with that. But it's private. It's private. I mean, a few people are involved. But I suffer these indignities in front of millions. And I want to play you a small sample, in case you haven't heard, a small sample of what I'm talking about. Could you please play clip 1?
Ribbing Allan is one of the 5 greatest pleasures in my life. Why the staggering affection for the Pope? Allan adds a reason here, and that is that people love the name John Paul.
He's
laughing.
laughing.
I was curious. I was at the Reagan Library early this week.
Yep.
And I saw Allan up there on stage, and I was just curious. What does he do? He was just sitting behind a computer.
Yeah, he doesn't do much. In Philadelphia, I can't look at Allan and get an answer. Allan, that's what we need to do, is to have a little video thing, so we can, no, maybe not, I take it back. Well, it's a bad idea. Hey, making Allan miserable is one of the great joys of my life.
Now, do I harbor the slightest grudge, the slightest hint of bitterness? No again. Steve, I think we need to double that Prozac dose. So people ask me all the time, they say, what's it like behind the scenes? What's it like to work with Dennis? And I really can't tell you, because I do want to keep my job. But I will tell you this, a quote Michael will know from one of my favorite films, which is, "It's an up-at-dawn siege, the likes of which I can never fully tell you about." I can tell you this, however, on more than a few occasions, Dennis has come into the office, I should say staggered into the office, badly hung over. Oh yes. Not with anything as benign as booze, oh no. Dennis doesn't touch the stuff. I'm talking about something worse. Spider solitaire. And if you know anyone who suffers from that affliction, then you know what I mean. Here's a personal detail you don't know. Most times he arrives at the studio late, comes in with some crazy excuse, like he was talking to Radio Swaziland, they wanted to interview him, or he was stuck on the 2. There hasn't been a backup on the 2 since they built the 2. It doesn't matter. He comes in, sits down, rips open a cold one, I'm talking about a Diet Coke, and eats a cookie. I'm not making this up. With a knife and fork. I've offered to buy him a steak knife so he could cut around the chocolate chips. But he has refused my offer. Now, most days, he's ready. At 9:06, the gladiator music comes on, the on-air light comes up, and quite remarkably, a little bit like Clark Kent and Superman, he's ready to go to work, thanks in part to a lot of hard work done by myself, Eva, and Sean. And he becomes the talk show host that you know and admire. Sometimes his insights are so keen that he can actually see into the future, as he did in January of 2004. Clip 2, please.
I have a prediction. Wesley Clark will be the Democratic nominee for president.
Sometimes his powers of perception are so vast, they simply dazzle you, as he did in this call with a trucker carrying a very large consignment of a certain vegetable. Clip 3, please.
45,000 pounds of celery.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. What does it smell like?
Smells like celery.
And sometimes he'll go mano a mano with a caller, be cornered by the caller, and then by some intellectual jujitsu will manage to get himself out of it. Again, simply dazzles us with his intellect, as in this example, one of my favorite calls of all time. Clip 4, please.
A couple of months ago, you made a comment that marsupials are not true mammals. And,
I said that?
That's the way I remember it.
Oh, no, I can't believe I said that.
Well, if that's...
I believe you. I believe you.
Okay, marsupials are true mammals.
All right, there you go.
And...
I can't believe I would blow it on marsupials.
To be a mammal, you only have to have hair and suckle young, and marsupials do that.
You have to have hair.
To be a mammal.
Well, wait a minute. What is what's a whale?
A whale is a mammal.
They have hair?
That's true. Well, that's a good question.
Do I have a little more time? Okay. It dazzled me. And then the show proceeds, the end of the week rolls around, and we get to the happiness hour, and that friggin' happiness theme. I've lost that battle. I know it. I lost it. I gave up. I mean, there have been YouTube videos about it. People have written lyrics to that song. Lawrence Welk never would have written it if he realized what Dennis would have done with it. But I have decided, rather than fight the battle, I'm going to build on it, as it were. And this summer, we are hoping to put out a CD entitled Prager Sings. You know, Sinatra sings, Prager sings, which will include some of the best, or depending on your point of view, worst covers of the happiness theme, but also some modern music, some covers of pop songs, original compositions, and even Dennis accompanying himself. And I think this album is going to go gold. Clip 5, please.
Ayo, my pen and paper cause a chain reaction to get your brain relaxing, a zany actin' maniac in action. A brainiac, in fact, son, you mainly lack attraction. You looked insanely whack when just a fraction of my tracks run. My rhyming skills got you climbing hills.
Put your head on my shoulder. Hold me in your arms, baby. Squeeze me oh so tight. Show me that you love me too. Put your lips next to mine, dear.
Yakaloon and ice the sailor. Walk right in, sit right there. Baby, let your mind go on. Walk right in, sit right there. Baby, let your mind go on.
Everybody's talking about a blue whale.
Got her work cut out, work cut out, work her cut.
Did you get the interpretation of where he changed shoulder, put your head on my shoulder to boulder? That I like. Okay, now we come to the part of the presentation, traditionally where the roaster says very nice things about the roastie, kind of taking the edge off, what a wonderful person he is, what a great person he is to work with, what a credit he is to his profession, a humanitarian, and so on. I'm just going to skip it. Thank you very much.
Some very impressive song stylings there. Today on my show, I think we did the radio premiere of the new Mike Gravel. I'm serious. Mike Gravel is running for the Libertarian Party nomination now, and he is. And Mike Gravel released a music video of him performing Helter Skelter. I wish it were a joke. It includes some sound actualities from Dwight Eisenhower. It is, Dennis, I think you've got competition here with some of these song stylings. All right. Next, we have the opportunity to speak to someone who has known Dennis for a very, very long time, and probably even has recollections of, a lot of you don't know this, but when Dennis had to decide what he was going to do with his life, whether he was going to go into media and communications and writing books and changing people, he had to decide between that and professional basketball. Because Dennis at Yeshiva Flatbush, they had a powerful basketball team. And Dennis's brother had been a star, and Dennis, as I understand, was a star who at a key moment in the game got the ball, went to the wrong basket, and scored 2 points for the other team. One of the few people here, other than my sources for that story, which will remain nameless. We protect our sources in media. One of the few people here who would remember that was a friend of Dennis's from Yeshiva Flatbush, someone who did significantly better academically than Dennis did. Dennis, I think, is very proud. John McCain goes all around talking about how he graduated fifth from the bottom at the Naval Academy. He does. He said it the other day. He's proud of it. Given Yeshiva Flatbush Naval Academy, Dennis's ranking in the class at Yeshiva Flatbush, even more serious. But you'll hear about that. You'll also hear from somebody who really is one of the leading literary lights in American Jewish writing, who has written everything. He not only has written a magisterial book on Jewish ethics, he is the author of the huge bestseller, Jewish Literacy. He is the rabbi of the Synagogue for the Performing Arts. He's also the author of some very entertaining murder mysteries with a mystery-solving rabbi. You've heard of Father Brown, and this is Rabbi Daniel Winter Mysteries. Somebody who has known Dennis forever and co-wrote with Dennis the two first books of Joseph Telushkin, the two first books of Dennis Prager, The 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism, and Why the Jews. And Why the Jews, they had a special edition where they just had a lot of blank pages and answered the question, why the Jews, in the right Jewish response with another question, why the Jews, why not? Think of all the trees that could have been saved. It's a wonderful book, actually. Without further ado, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin.
By the way, Michael, in the story you told, if I remember correctly, Dennis really wasn't a great basketball player. Everything was accurate. He did get the ball, he did go to the wrong basket, and he still, I don't think, got it in. Dennis and I have been friends since we were 15, and we were sophomores at the Yeshiva of Flatbush in Brooklyn. Many of the passions that later preoccupied him were already apparent then. For example, he was fascinated with, very angry at, communism. I remember when I went to his house, he showed me, he had scrapbooks. For the last half year, he had cut out every article on the Soviet Union in the New York Times, and he collected scrapbooks of it. He was also teaching himself Russian at the time. A few weeks later, my parents met Max and Hilda. They were together online on parent-teachers night. And Max said to my mother, and she came home and reported, she said, I send him here to a Jewish school to learn Hebrew. Instead, he brings books, holds them under the table, and studies Russian. I probably should have sent him to a Russian school, then maybe he would have studied Hebrew. Which points out an aspect of Dennis. He never let his school interfere with his education. Michael noted was indeed correct. Dennis graduated 92 in our high school class. I was 83, which wouldn't sound so bad if it was one of these large public schools. It was the Yeshiva of Flatbush. He was 92 out of 110. Many of Dennis's characteristic features were already apparent in his earlier years. His great optimism about what he could accomplish and how quickly he could do so. It was Dennis who came up with the idea for our first book, which evolved into 8 questions people ask about Judaism. We sat around for weeks refining what the questions would be. And then I remember Dennis shocked me and he said, you know what, let's get together. We'll do it as a pamphlet and we'll do it over a weekend. By the way, and we don't write on Shabbat, so Saturday's out. A year later, we finished the book. At the time, I was a grad student at Columbia. Dennis was already traveling around the country lecturing. I had a small place where I was living, at Columbia. Dennis had a nice apartment. I would go there. The apartment was a mess. Books, papers, magazines were strewn all over the floor, in the living room, in the bedroom, in the kitchen, on the stove, which wasn't used because Dennis always went out to diners. There was a period of time when he had halibut every night. I didn't know that. I walk into a diner and the waiter knows him. He said, oh, Mr. Halibut has arrived. Anyway, getting back to Dennis's messy apartment. One night, a thief dropped a large rock onto Dennis's car. It broke the window of the car. He stole Dennis's car stereo. So Dennis called up the police, who came to take a report. They come to his house. They knock on the door. They walk in. They see the mess in the apartment. And the cop lets out a whistle and says, they did some job on you. They took this whole place apart. When the embarrassed Dennis explained that it wasn't his house that was robbed by his car, the cop laughed. He said, what a great idea. You keep your house like this. If a thief breaks in, he'll assume somebody else was already there. Dennis has always been an optimist about the books he's writing. Among the titles I'm still expecting to see are books that he was definitely writing: Understanding Men and Women, The Judeo-Christian Basis of American Society, Since God Died, 9 Questions About America, which God willing we'll do someday, Explaining Male Sexuality. There are 82 books we're waiting for. While we were writing the book, we'd each take turns. We'd write different chapters, then critique each other. Dennis did most of the editing, and he was a good editor. He claimed my style was too anecdotal, with too many digressions, took too long to make a point. Dennis loved to enumerate, though, the points he was making, and if he had had the book written the way he wanted, it really wouldn't have been a conventional book. It would have been a manual. For example, one of the questions was, who needs Jewish law or organized religion? So this is how Dennis would have answered it. There are 16 reasons, which I will now enumerate A to P, on why we need organized religion. Reason A, we need organized religion because religion isn't only concerned with affecting the individual, but of affecting society as a whole. There are 9 reasons why religion wants to affect society, which I will now enumerate in Roman numerals. Reason 1 is because people can't be trusted to be good on their own. There are 12 reasons why people can't be trusted to be good on their own, which I will now enumerate. Another feature of Dennis is he's always looking for the bigger truth. Nothing can ever just happen to him. There is a major lesson to be learned. For example, Dennis as a young man liked to date, a lot. His relations, though, for a long period of time tended to be short, and inevitably I would get a phone call. I broke up with so-and-so. Why? I realized she wasn't really a warm person, and I now understand that warmth is the most important trait in a woman. A month later, I broke up. Why? No sense of humor. Humor really matters. It's hard to be with someone who is humorless. 2 weeks later, I broke up. Not sharp intellectually. A week later, not concerned with moral issues. 6 weeks later, I broke up with so-and-so, and I interrupted him. I said, I know why. He said, how could you know? You never met her. He said, I don't know, but I know whatever trait she's missing is the most important trait in a woman. As a staunch Republican, Dennis stands in the line of many great Republican thinkers, people who've long deepened our understanding of the human condition, like President Calvin Coolidge, who made the insightful observation, when people are unable to find work, unemployment results. Or Thomas Dewey, the 1948 Republican presidential candidate whose most incisive line in the campaign was, "The future lies before us." Or when Dennis was considering a run for Congress and made this apt comment, a leaderless society is a society without leaders. A final thought about a man whose friendship has transformed my life in so many ways. In our 20s, we evolved an understanding of religion in the world that, though periodically modified and refined, has guided us ever since, and whose love has always enriched me, even if he doesn't return phone calls. Anyway, we've been friends since we were 15, and I remember our friendship. We used to go and spend time in your basement, in the Prager basement, and talking over the world. In those days, Dennis always called me rabbi. I was 15. I wasn't then even planning to become a rabbi. And he would speak of what he would do one day in the Senate. Well, I became a rabbi. Dennis has done wonderful things, but I must admit I always look forward to the possibility of one day calling him Mr. Senator, or in the title of a famous Yiddish story, if not higher.
There is no smoking at the Nixon Library. Is that right? Even cigars. No smoking. Even to try to come to terms with Dennis's utterly irrational fascination with cigars, we are going to get some psychiatric help. As a matter of fact, I think it's very appropriate. The Dennis Prager Show is the only radio show I know of that actually has its own in-house psychiatrist. And don't mention Dr. Laura. She's a physiologist. She's a physiologist. No, but Dr. Stephen Marmer is a real psychiatrist, a distinguished one, in private practice, and someone who teaches psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine, and who brings his regular psychiatric perspectives to bear on the question of happiness. We were talking about this being Dennis's bar mitzvah. One of the questions that came up is, I was speaking before about Dennis's bar mitzvah, the real bar mitzvah, when he was 13 years old. And he's welcomed into manhood in the Jewish tradition. And apparently the rabbi on the occasion was introducing Dennis for his bar mitzvah speech and said, "You will look back on this as one of the happiest days of your life." And then Dennis began, it says, "It depends on whether you understand the difference between fun and happiness." And so it began. Somebody who can give us a proper Freudian perspective on this entire question. And do remember that Dr. Freud, of all the brilliant things he said, the most brilliant, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Dr. Stephen Marmer.
Michael, what's this thing with you and cigars?
That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard.
Right. You know, I've known Dennis for a long time, and I could say some real tender things, but in deference to the audience, here it goes. More than 150 years ago, in a city near Prague, Sigmund Freud was born. He moved to Vienna, sharing the Danube River with Prague, the home of the Pragers. As a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, I've been waiting for decades to find a subject who confirms Freud's stages of development: oral, anal, phallic, Oedipal, and so forth. Finally, I was able to locate someone who is fixated in each and every one of Freud's stages. Dennis Prager. We know everything begins with the oral phase. As a matter of fact, I remember when you had your evening show and I was listening, you pulled out a piece of fruit and bit into it and said, "I'll bet you can't guess what I'm biting into." And I immediately knew it was a nectarine. And he says, "It isn't a peach, it's a nectarine." So I knew that we would be friends ever since. Anyway, we know what a great talker he is, but he's also a good eater. You're looking really good tonight. You're temporarily slim. Dennis has lost 4,862 pounds in the 20-plus years that we've been friends, and he's only gained back 4,852. You've done a good job mastering your oral urges, and you can control it now with cigars and pipes that satisfy the oral urges that food doesn't address. Dennis also, for those of you who know him well, has an oral fixation, A-U-R-A-L, as any of you who have seen the evolution of his stereo system can attest. His system keeps changing every 6 months or so, getting bigger and better, and especially bigger. His latest speakers could play linebacker for the Chicago Bears. But now I learn in his new home that for the first time, he's getting smaller, shorter speakers. Don't worry, Dennis, there's a little blue pill for that. The anal phase comes next. That's the time when people learn to be meticulous and neat and fastidious and parsimonious, very thrifty with their money. And perhaps you don't know, if you haven't actually visited him in his home, how meticulous and neat Dennis is with his office and his paperwork, and how he keeps all of his financial records so obsessively up to date, and how thorough he is in checking all the contracts that he signs. Right, George? Oops! That's Alan Breeze I'm talking about, not Dennis. Now, the phallic phase needs no explanation. Dennis, phallic phase, right? In his more mature life now, Dennis sublimates his phallic urges to fountain pens and cars and, yes, more cigars. And I certainly can't leave out the forceful way Dennis swings his baton around when conducting an orchestra. However, any further description of this would be too X-rated for the polite audience that we're with. We know that it was the Oedipal phase that made Freud famous. The Oedipal phase, as you know, the little boy falls in love with his mother and then suppresses that love for fear his father will castrate him if he gets too close to her. Anyone who knows Hilda immediately sees how easy it is to fall in love with her. She's absolutely amazing. So to avoid drawing his father's ire, Dennis has avoided that mother image and instead dedicated his life to Viking women. To Viking women. Hi there, Sue. And as for his father, the only person I've ever met who so dominates a room that even Dennis can hardly get in a word edgewise is Dennis's father, Mac. Hi, Mac. It's true, it's true. Normally, children leave the Oedipus complex and enter what is called latency phase. This is the time that they leave their childhood anger and childhood emotions and temper tantrums and infantile sexuality and buckle down to learning during the school years. But Dennis broke that rule. He never left any of those things behind. One can say he continued his childhood right up to his arrival at adolescent rebellion and sexuality and has remained there ever since. He and Sue recently returned from a cruise to India with Allan and Susie Estrin, and the Estrins were in the midst of explaining to Ruth and me how beautiful the residents of India were when Dennis interrupted with a rapturous description of how gorgeous the men of India were. And suddenly I recognized the defensive reason why he's so against same-sex marriage. Dennis also suffers from several severe psychiatric... Here, you can try that. Dennis also suffers from several severe psychiatric conditions. He apparently has no memory for names or faces, and he has an overwhelming phobia against returning phone calls. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, that there's no cure for either of these. One contribution that Dennis has made to my practice and to my understanding of males is that every man has within him a secret Mr. Magoo. Only for Dennis, it's an inner and an outer Mr. Magoo. He is so perilously close, but not quite, in the happy moron stage. Nevertheless, I've never seen anyone walk through danger and come out happy and utterly oblivious more than Dennis. Finally, I want to make a serious observation. As Allan said, this is the nice part. Each week of the year is assigned a portion of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. And I have a theory that the Torah portion of the week of your birth makes some contribution in shaping your destiny. For me, my birth Torah portion was Miketz, and that's where Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, and I became a psychoanalyst. For Dennis, the portion was known as Matot Maseh, in which God commands Moses to fight against idolatry. And Dennis has certainly fulfilled the destiny of his Torah portion, despite, or perhaps even because, of all of his various fixations.
Let me acknowledge, and this is not apocryphal, this is the real thing. I've been friends with Dennis for 31 years, since I was a child. Dennis is so much older than I am. Dennis is 61 days older than I am. And, but we've been friends for a very long time. And I will say this by way of introducing our next roaster. It really is because of Dennis that I'm on the radio. And it was really Dennis who made it clear to me more than 20 years ago that, wait a minute, this was a better means and the best means of communication. You probably remember, he used to do a radio show called Religion on the Line. How many people here listen to Religion on the Line? And the idea was it'd be a minister and a priest and a rabbi, and Dennis would sometimes bring in imams and various Buddhist monks and outer space visitors to mix it up. And the whole idea was, there was Sunday night, and it was thrilling, and Dennis did such a great job, and here it was every Sunday night arguing about religion. And a light bulb went off in my head. I thought, wait a minute, Jewish guys arguing about religion, that's something we do for free. All the time. And here he is, he's actually figured out a way to get paid for this. Not much, George Hiltzik, but at that time. But that really inspired me, and then appearing as a guest on Dennis's show, and then it's really because of Dennis's example that I've been able to have the great joy of doing my own show for almost 12 years now. And Dennis has made a similar recognition to our next speaker. And one of the things that truly is wonderful about Dennis is Dennis recognizes and acknowledges people who have helped him, who have inspired him, who have done good for him. One of those people is Bruce Herschensohn. Because Bruce, for so many years, showed that you could win every argument with the cool use of reason and dignity and persuasive power and class. He graced, and I mean graced, the airwaves on KBC here for so many years, and on TV, and so many other media outlets. He had the great honor of serving the president, whose house we're in now, President Richard Nixon, as a special assistant. And he was an outstanding Republican nominee for the United States Senate from the great state of California. You know, one of the questions that Dennis asks is, how can you believe in a just God when people get cancer? And it's a real question. It's the theodicy question. I think one of the real questions is, how can you believe in a just God when Bruce Herschensohn is not our United States Senator from California? Bruce Herschensohn.
Thank you, Michael. That was magnificent. Thank you so much. One of the perils of speaking at something like this is that you don't know what the other roasters are going to say, and you don't want to be repetitive. So I tried to think of those things that definitely would not be repetitive or that you wouldn't hear from anyone else. And Dennis and I have known each other more than the 25 years. And one thing that I have learned a lot about was his youth when he was just a child, and I'm so glad that Mr. and Mrs. Prager are here, Max and Hilda. And he doesn't talk about his real childhood much. Dennis was born in a very impoverished village in China. Dennis is Chinese. Yeah, he is. He was born, Max and Hilda know this. They just don't talk about it much. He was born August the 2nd of 1948, right? Right, Dennis? And that was at a time when, just in the years to come, there'd be the communist revolution. Mao Zedong was coming into China. It's very, very tough for Dennis because, as you know, he's a very religious guy. He was a very, very devout Baptist. And Dennis was in the Baptist boys choir in church outside. He was a soprano, very high voice. And he was also very, very thin and scrawny. And because of that, really, no one liked him. And that was justified. I probably wouldn't have liked him either. And so it came about that the communists were going to close down the Baptist church, and Dennis was terribly upset. Really, his life was not good. And he decided that what he would do would go to the base of this mountain outside of Guangzhou. He went to the base of the mountain because there was a rumor that there was a old bearded wise man who was at the top, at the summit of the mountain, and if you went to him for advice, he'd always give you advice. I mean, you know all of this, Dennis, so this is... So he went there and he climbed the mountain, and sure enough, there was this old bearded wise man on the top of the mountain, and Dennis told him about all of his problems, that he was, very scrawny, and that the communists came in and all of that, and how he felt about the church, the Baptist church. And the old wise man said to him, "Dennis, what you should do is put on a little weight. See if you can lower your voice a little. Change your race, religion, and nationality. Go across the great ocean to California, and you will have a marvelous career in radio." And Dennis said, "And you think you're a wise man?" So the old wise man was a little bit hurt because Dennis didn't want to pay much attention to him, so he thought it'd add to it. He said, "And as soon as you get to California, Dennis, you go to KABC and then change to KRLA, and you will have a magnificent career." Dennis was very discouraged about all this. He came down from the mountain, and he wanted to think, even at that age, he wouldn't take anyone's advice. He didn't care what anyone said. He wanted to think his own original path for the future, and he went home to, as you know, the mud hut, and he was lying on the floor at night trying to think of what to do, and he says, "I got it, and it's my own stuff. I know what I want to do. I'm going to gain a little weight. I'm going to see if I can lower my voice a little. And I'm going to change my race, religion, and nationality. I'm going to go across the sea. I'm going to get a job on talk radio at KABC and then change to KRLA, and my career will really take off." And it was just absolutely superb that he was able to do this. And now it's 25 years later, and Dennis is so significant to California and so significant to the United States. And I think that there's no argument about the fact that he ranks with Dean Reinders, Ezra Scoggins, and Alla Barlow. And he does. If you're not familiar with those names, I don't know them either, but he does rank with them. Now I'll just tell you one significant story. 18 years ago, Dennis and I went to Moscow together. Did. No, we did. No, we did. this is really true. We really did go to Moscow together. And it was at a marvelous time historically. The Soviet Union was dying. It hadn't died yet. It didn't die till 1992. But this was 89 or 90 when we went there. And as soon as, it was just a magnificent time because it was really dying. So we got out of the car at this hotel, and there was a beautiful expanse of green lawn. And there was a little wall around it. Dennis jumped out of the car and he ran to the wall and he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And I said, it was just terribly, it was terribly embarrassing for me. I said, "Dennis, there's no political implication. There's just a wall." But he wouldn't stop. And the days ahead, Moscow, when we left, was a rubble because of all of the little walls around gardens. Everything was all messed up. Just one other thing I want to tell you, that Dennis is a magnificent author. I think you know that. He's written a number of books in the past 25 years. And the one that I was very excited, I think it's the one that's probably the most well-known, Think a Second Time. I brought it with me. Think a Second Time. And I read it, and I just loved it. It was just great wisdom, just a magnificent book. But then I looked at do you want to just hand me that, Dennis? I looked at it, I looked to find the title. Of course, very modestly, the title was very hard to find. No, I do. Oh, no. I know that. Publishers do that. No. The authors don't have anything to do with that. But anyway, I saw the title, Think a Second Time. I found it, and I thought, you know, the guy's right. And I reread the book, and it wasn't so good. In conclusion, I just want to tell you this. When he was on Religion on the Line, when he was doing that, and don't applaud, it really wasn't that great a show. When he was on Religion on the Line, we got to know each other quite well. And I said to him at that time, and this was 25 years ago, I said, "Dennis, there's chapters of life. I've known people, their best days were in high school, or in the service, or middle age, old." And I said, "Dennis, your best days are ahead because you're going to have a lot of experiences that'll add to your wisdom." And now 25 years have passed, and it's very obvious that I was wrong. I don't know. I don't know when his best days were, but we've all missed them. Look, roasts are not for telling the truth, but in truth, because I got to do this before leaving the podium, I just think the world of Dennis, and he is just a magnificent guy. And anyone who has listened to him or read his books, greatly privileged. And the United States has been enriched and will remain enriched by his presence, and so will generations yet unborn. Thanks, Dennis, for being Dennis.
You know how in life cycle events, it's normal for people to talk about people who have traveled the longest distance. And here's Aunt Mildred and Uncle Bob, who have come all the way from Frostbite Falls, Minnesota. Actually, Joseph Telushkin is but he had to be here anyway for the Synagogue for the Performing Arts. But somebody who has traveled all the way from New York City is Anybody here old enough to remember the This Is Your Life show with Bob Edwards? And what we should really do is have people behind the curtain, like they do in Bob Edwards at This Is Your Life show. And do you recognize this voice, Dennis? Well, he would certainly recognize the voice of George Hiltzik. So, unfortunately, would every radio executive in the country. George is perhaps the most prominent radio agent in the United States. Most significantly here, he is Dennis's agent. He is my agent. He is Bill Bennett's agent. And yeah, he is. And actually, it's because of Dennis that I got stuck with Hiltzik. And it's because of me and Dennis that Bennett got stuck with Hiltzik. And it's because of Dennis, me, and Bennett that Ed Atzinger got stuck with Hiltzik. George Hiltzik pursued a distinguished educational career at Yeshiva of Flatbush. There's beginning to be a theme here. Now, I want you to know, it is not deliberate that every single speaker tonight so far has been Jewish. That is nothing that we plan. This is an answer. And Dennis, you get these emails too. I got an email today. It said, you think that you and your Christian fanatic colleagues will succeed in taking over America. And we get it all the time. I mean, it's unbelievable. Dennis and I have to be the two most regularly attacked people in the country who are attacked for being Christian fanatics who aren't Christian. In any event, that's not usually an attack that is leveled at George Hiltzik, who has represented Dennis as his agent, and he will begin a new negotiation right here. George Hiltzik.
Many people think that agents only talk about themselves, so I was told I have 20 seconds. Before my prepared remarks, I want to say a few things. I think I'm an honest, caring, dedicated person. Dennis never went to the Yeshiva of Flatbush. I want you to know he made this up, and it pains me that in my short remarks I'm going to tell you what Dennis is really like. And let me begin by telling you, 20 years ago I had a sense of humor, and then I met Dennis. And you tend to evaluate your professional achievements by how you look at talent. And 20 years ago, I called Joseph Telushkin, who I felt was dynamic, funny, articulate, and wasn't he great tonight? And I think we should thank Joseph for his wisdom. So I called Joseph up, and I say to Joseph, listen, I think you'd be great on the radio because you're a great storyteller, and after all, what's talk radio is being a great storyteller. And Joseph very modestly said, George, please, I'm not the right guy. Please call my friend Dennis. Now, it happens that my parents knew Dennis's parents. I knew Dennis's brothers. My sister did, so it was really family. So I called Dennis up, and I say, Joseph Telushkin thinks I could really help you. What are you doing now? He says, I have a show about religion. So I hung up the phone, because I said, Joseph, what, are you kidding me? And then I thought that was pretty rude, so I called Dennis back and I said, well, tell me about it. And he proceeds to tell me this idea of having all these different clergy people do a radio show. And I'm thinking of shows like The Maury Povich Show and all these wonderful reality shows early on, like The Richard Bay Show, which is as crude could be, and was very successful. And I'm saying, religion, you got to be kidding. But you want to try to listen, so I listened. And then I realized this was very special. So our journey began, and I'm going to say a few nice things about Mr. Atzinger and Terry Fay and others, because you have to understand what it's like dealing with ABC. So we start working, and the ratings are terrific, and I talk to ABC, and I say, look, why don't you put them on Monday through Friday? It's never going to work. And when you're friendly with somebody who's part of your family, you become more passionate. So finally, we had demonstrations, and they put them on in the evenings. And again, Dennis dominated the airwaves. So we tried again, and then he was on KBC during the day, again in a dominant position. So then the issue is people saying to me, you have such a star, here he is at ABC, and they say, what it's like working with Dennis? And I said, well, at the time when he was at ABC, he always talked about lofty matters and great values. So he would call me up one day and say, George, my chair is too high. So I'd say, okay, Dennis, I'll be glad to deal with this. And then I call up, and then 2 weeks later he says, George, my chair is too low. And I, okay, Dennis, I'll deal with that. And then, as you know, Dennis loves newspapers and loves books. So he calls me up and said, I'm not coming to work tomorrow. I said, what's the matter? He said, my desk is not big enough. I said, Dennis, it's a football field. We can't fit any more room in the studio. And then Dennis, we talked about his diets, and as you know, he would complain about the vending machines because it didn't have the food he wanted. And these were the highbrow, elevating things Dennis had me do for his career. And he's going to deny it, but trust me, I'm the only one telling the truth tonight. And besides, when you go back to his yeshiva Flatbush days, when they talk about his academic achievements, there were 3 classes, the A class, the B class, and the C class. Dennis was in the D class, all by himself. And in terms of, I'm just trying to pick out the highlights of his illustrious career. As many of you remember, Dennis had a late-night television talk show. And Dennis, if you look back, and I have some tapes of the old shows, did really significant subjects that were very meaningful, and we had a wonderful following. And then Dennis says, well, I'm looking at the ratings, and I said, Dennis, let me explain something to you. If we look at the ratings over the last 3 months, the highest rated show you had, and this is absolutely true, was the Fredericks of Hollywood models who showed their lingerie. And I said, Dennis, this is what it's going to be. And true to his credit, he said, I'm not going to do those kinds of shows. So as part of, and you know that's true, so as part of an agent's role, I mean, the television show was very lucrative, and it's very important for me to help build the Hiltzik Family Foundation. And I said to Dennis, I have to tell you, I respect this, and we're going to go on to bigger and better. So now we're dealing with ABC, and they're not giving us what we wanted, and I had the pleasure of my first introduction to the Salem family and to Mr. Atzinger. And in quick order, we made the deal with Dennis. And as I look back, and this is the serious part because I'm really not that funny, I was at KABC today, this morning, and I'm talking to the general manager, and I am very grateful because I do represent some very good people. But I said to John Davison, how are the ratings in the morning? He says, well, you know, we're okay. You know, Bill O'Reilly's doing okay. He's holding his own. And I said, you know, John, I'm just not quite certain. I mean, how's Dennis doing? And a look of sadness came over his face, and he said, well, you know, George, he's beating Bill regularly. And that just gave us great excitement. So in a world of being very competitive as we are, it just gives me great pleasure being here tonight telling you that ABC's loss has been Salem's gain and everybody's gain here. And I'm very proud to say that. As I conclude, it's very important to know one part of Dennis's values. As you know, He is very laid back, does not have good self-esteem, and doesn't like being in the public eye. And one wants to know, how did Dennis get that way? And I think I will tell my favorite story about the Prager family, and that was when Dennis had his syndicated television show. There's a programming convention every year, and this particular year was in Miami, and the Pragers had an apartment in Miami. And I thought, what is better than to call up a parent and say, let me take you through the convention center. Dennis's picture is going to be with the likes of Phil Donahue, Jerry Springer, Sally Jesse Raphael. I mean, this is really good stuff. So let me walk you through, would you like to see the convention center? And Dennis, being the respectful son that he is, I said, Dennis, I'm going to call your parents, and I'll give them a tour of the convention center, and they can meet everybody. And Dennis says, that's fine, but make sure you do it before I get there. So I said, okay, I'll be glad to. So I called the Pragers, and I say to Mrs. Prager, I'd like to meet you. And I hadn't seen her in many years, and I'll take you to the convention center. I said, Mrs. Prager, it's a very big place, so I want to meet you, and I give the designated door. And I said, well, how would I recognize you? And she said, George, it's very simple. I'm very tall, I have gray hair, and I'm very good looking. So if Mrs. Prager, could you please stand up? Come on, stand up. Now, there is one little known fact. So I take her through the convention center, and Dennis had not yet arrived, and multimedia was syndicating the program, and Mrs. Prager, being the shy, retiring soul, similar to her son, I introduce her to the president of multimedia, and she starts telling them this would be a terrific show, and this is absolutely true. The most successful on-air promo for Dennis's show was the one that Mrs. Prager was in, which ran all across the country. So then I had a moral dilemma. Do I represent Dennis or do I represent Mrs. Prager? And I then concluded that she was so gracious, she said, either you represent my husband or Dennis. So Mac, I got to tell you, I chose Dennis. And finally, being an agent, I have to fulfill the stereotype. And many months ago, I met with Terry, and I said, Terry, it's Dennis's 25th year, and the marketplace is challenged, and we want to develop non-traditional revenue. So I said that maybe we can have maybe 4 events celebrating this wonderful achievement, and we could do it at different sites, and we could be very creative. So to Terry's credit and the station's credit, we have this one event. So my request to all of you, and I want you to know this is not self-serving. It's not that I'm going to be making more money and more fame. It's not about me. But I want you to please call the station tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and launch a campaign that we should have 3 more events during the year where we could share Dennis with his beloved audience and continue to grow the legacy of our friend and mentor, Dennis Prager.
Well, in that regard, I was going to shock everybody, I thought, but that's a perfect setup from George Hiltzik. Many of you know that one of the traditions of the Dennis Prager Show is very exotic and glamorous and educational cruises. How many people here have ever been on a Dennis Prager cruise? Okay, some of you have been. And one of the real questions always is, having tackled Antarctica and the Panama Canal and most places, where is the next Dennis Prager cruise going to take place? And I'm very, very excited to tell you that the very next Dennis Prager cruise is going to be taking place this fall, after the Jewish holidays, right after the Jewish holidays, but before the election. It'll be a special 9-day cruise on the Los Angeles River. We're going to be, Dennis is going to be exploring the history, the anthropology, the botany, the graffiti expression, every aspect. You will see the Los Angeles River in a brand new light, luxury accommodations, and I think we're going to go ahead and there's going to be a contest for free passage on the cruise, 9-day cruise, and the grand prize will be 1 free passage, and the second prize will be 2 free passages. All right, having spoken about that, and having George Hiltzik having brought up KEBC, just to show that this is not all about trying to find a minion up here, a Jewish prayer quorum. And it's also not just about the Salem lineup, even though that really is the only worthwhile lineup in radio. Please remember that, Mr. Hiltzik. Just to show that we're not there, we are going to hear from, by the magic of videotape, I believe, we're going to hear from somebody else who does a wonderful radio show, and somebody else really who is on the radio because of Dennis Prager, Larry Elder.
A great honor that you've even asked me to participate in your event. Well, did that sound at all sincere? Okay, good. Dennis, you've been in the business now 25 years. I mean, that's incredible. 25 years. That's like 2 or 3 hours of entertainment, and that's really incredible. And of course, everybody knows that you brought me here to Los Angeles. Had it not been for you, I wouldn't have been on the air. And I can't thank you enough. I get great mail. Dear Larry, you're a bootlicking Uncle Tom. Dear Larry, eat blank and die. And I have to say, but for you, I wouldn't be getting charming mail like that. Often sent by you, as a matter of fact. But Dennis, I want to tell a story, and I know Max is here, your dad, and I hope your dad is not upset about my telling this story, but you probably heard about this, Dennis. Your dad was not feeling very well. And he's lying in bed, and it was, I got to be honest, kind of touch and go there for a while. And your mom was sitting next to him, and your dad said, honey, we've been married all these decades, and have you ever strayed? Have you ever been tempted to do something outside of our marriage? And your mom said, oh, honey, I don't think we should get into that right now. And he goes, no, really, I'd like to know. And your mom said, well, if you insist. You remember the time you got fired and your boss fired you for no apparent reason, and about 2 weeks later you got rehired with a substantial raise? And Max said, yeah. And your mom said, well. And he goes, well, after he got over that, it was kind of a shock. He said, well, come on, all these years of marriage, just one time. And your mom said, well, wait a minute. Remember that time we had that tax lien on the house and we almost lost the house? And that tax guy I met, and about 2 weeks later we removed the lien and you got a substantial refund plus interest. Well, and your dad, said, okay, all these years of marriage, 2 times. I mean, I should have a little perspective. And your mom said, wait a second. Another time you ran for president of your country club and you thought you were going to lose by 12 votes. Your mom said, well, and you won by 13. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have gotten into that. And finally, I want to just say this. Dennis is, as you know, very, very religious, and he began his career by that wonderful show called Religion on the Line. My mother really enjoyed listening to it. And one time, Dennis and I got into this heavy discussion about religion. And I said, Dennis, do you think it's just as easy for a black man to get into heaven as it is for a Gentile, a white Gentile, or a Jew? And you said, oh, certainly. Dennis said, let me tell you a story. These three guys, a Jewish guy and a white Gentile and a black guy were killed, unfortunately, in a traffic accident, and they all went up to heaven, and they were standing by the pearly gates, and Gabriel was there, and the white Gentile went up there and said, Gabriel, I'd like to come into heaven. And Gabriel said, not a problem, just spell the word God. And the white Gentile said G-O-D, and the gates magically opened. It was incredible. The Jew came up and said to Gabriel, I'd like to come into the pearly gates. And Gabriel said, not a problem, why don't you just spell Lord? And the Jew said L-O-R-D, and the gates just opened up. The black guy came up, and Gabriel said, sure, all you have to do is spell Engelbert Humperdinck. Anyway, Dennis, thank you so much for that story, because it just gave me so much comfort knowing that, when my eternal reward occurs, I'll be able to get into heaven. So, Dennis, again, congratulations. 25 years in a very difficult, very grueling, very competitive business. You are fantastic. Listen to you almost never, but if I did listen to somebody, it would probably be you. Okay? So that it, guys? Did any of that sound sincere? All right, good. Check. We're done.
Dennis is going to dance later. Later. That is something to behold. That is something to behold. All right, we're coming toward the end of our broadcast day, and we are, and we now get to hear from somebody else, like Bruce Herschensohn, who has a direct connection to this Nixon library. And that is my friend and colleague, Hugh Hewitt. A lot of you may know that when Hugh was a very young man, he worked for President Nixon. And then after he was released from prison, together with his colleague, the late E. Howard, Hugh actually, as you may know, is somebody who moonlights as a law professor. His real calling is doing an outstanding talk radio show every afternoon, doing one of the most influential political blogs on townhall.com. You know about townhall.com. That's the great internet outlet where Dennis Prager is contracted to do a blog every day.
Not now. What he said?
He said not now. Yes, no, townhall.com, wonderful resource. And Hugh, of course, makes it so. I was one of the people who makes it so. Hugh is also somebody who is well known for his political passions, and when it came time for Hugh to be invited to speak on this particular occasion, he said, well, I can't think of any occasion other than Mitt Romney's inauguration as president that I would rather address. Hugh Hewitt.
Look, thank you, Michael. It's really a pleasure to be here. I know we're running a little bit late because they made Dennis work a full shift at the Vista Lexus lot tonight, and so. By the way, how do you like my jacket? This is the jacket I wore to see the president at the White House. Magnesium. Look, I've learned a lot tonight. I've learned that if I'm on the radio 30 years, I'm never going to agree to do this. And I've also learned that I'm going to make sure that the fetching Mrs. Hewitt who's here tonight knows one thing, that if I lose my mind and they want to honor me after 40 years, not to let my producer near the microphone. Ever. Look, this is more of a meditation. This is not, I'm the transition person that the other ones are hoping takes the sting out so that Dennis will forget everything that's been said about him and he'll be kind to them and appropriately choked up. And so this is more of a meditation on Dennis, who, I'm the youngest of 3 boys, so I'm used to older brothers, and Dennis is like an older brother to me, a very much older brother to me. And there are 4 things I just want to tell you about it. The first is, I came over to KRLA in Salem in 2000 from PBS, and I really didn't know how to sell. You know, PBS, we don't make ads. We're stuffy, we got our nose in the air, we don't know how to sell. And after about 6 months, Edward called up to me and he said, you know, Hugh, this is a commercial enterprise. You really got to learn how to sell. I'd like you to go see Dennis Prager. So I drove out to see Dennis, and sure enough, he taught me about selling. He said, look, it's about, you keep your integrity. You never ever endorse a product that you don't believe in. But you be open to, and you don't have to endorse everything, you just be open to the possibility that you can help your audience learn about something that's important. I thought, that's pretty good advice. He said, well, good, let's just call it a day. Just remember that. Now, let me introduce you to my kids. This is California Deluxe Windows, this is Park Place Funding, and this is Aqua Solutions. Dennis can sell. Number 2, Dennis is the most extroverted person I know. Now, I am an introvert. You might not believe that, but I really am an introvert. A lot of people in our business are introverts. I think probably Michael's. Dennis is an extrovert's extrovert. In the world of broadcast, he's the Saint Bernard of broadcasters. I'm very comfortable as a Presbyterian, as many of you heard me say before, is because it's the church in which I'm least likely to be hugged. Dennis... I had a bet tonight coming in downstairs that as soon as I saw Dennis, he would envelop me in one of these patented Dennis Prager hugs. And of course he did. He has never noticed in the 15 years that I've known him that I am an Irish Catholic guy who goes, don't do that to me. He doesn't have that in him at all. But that creates a unique bond with his audience. Last night, it happened again. This is very annoying. There's one good side to being a colleague of Dennis's, which is no matter where I go with him, I'm the guy with the dark hair. I like that. Only time it happens. But the very annoying thing about Dennis is he has built this relationship with his audience, which is intense. It's really intense. Last night, I was at the Brethren Christian High School fundraiser. And there were 400 people there, and 300 of them came up to me and asked to be remembered to Dennis tonight. They didn't want to talk to me. They wanted to. One of them was a guy named Randy. He's the African-American baseball coach down there. And he said, Dennis would talk to me every Sunday night. My brother Wes would call up, and I would call up right after him, and I'd say, just forget everything that Wes did. And I said, I know Dennis will remember you. And he does. That's the relationship that he's built up with his audience. It's very annoying, though. It's very annoying that I have in the audience tonight 2 of my friends, Tim and Mark. And I've been going to church with these guys for 18 years. I've done maybe 50 speaking events, 100 speaking events, 200 speaking events in those years. They never ever asked me for a ticket to any of them, but they're here tonight because they want to hear Dennis Prager. This is very, very annoying to me. The third thing I want, that's the extrovert though. He can sell, he's extroverted. Third thing I want you to know about Dennis is that it's all an act because I've played cards with this man. Allan and Steve and Dennis spend Sabbath together, almost every Saturday, I assume. And I was honored to receive an invitation with Betsy to go one day and spend the afternoon and celebrate with them. And it was just a wonderful time. I didn't recognize any of the food at all, but it was a wonderful time, and we were having a great thing. And then after the meal was over, Dennis has a little joke, and then God said, what's the 11th command? You come up with it, I don't know. Then we play cards. And I thought, oh, a nice little game of cards. And they said, we play hearts. Do you play hearts? I said, well, I haven't played hearts since high school. An hour and a half later, dizzy, bloodied, and bruised. Dennis waved, Shabbat Shalom, see you later. I'd been rolled over like a steamroller. It was not even close. Don't play cards with Dennis. Absolutely don't. But he really is very genuine. Dennis is, to my understanding, I think probably the most evangelized Jew in America. He is. Am I right? Michael is, if it's not Dennis, it's Michael, right? We are proud to be part of a company. I'm looking at Ed and Roland here, and that just has God at the center of the company. We like that. That's why we love working for Salem. And we talk about God all the time, but I want to be there when Dennis meets St. Peter. Because St. Peter's going to say, honest to God, what's it going to take? And Dennis is going to say, give it your best shot, we're both Jews. But what I love about this is the meditation. In all those years, I've heard this. I run for cover when these two guys start talking theology with the brilliant theological minds that run our company. That's not what I do. I just run for the sidelines and watch. There's always been a great appreciation, and that's why Religion on the Line worked. It's why his show worked. It's just a great understanding, empathy for, and a great love of everyone who's in the business. Now, I couldn't possibly end on that note because it's nice. I heard Stephen say he's fearless. And I heard Stephen refer to the fact that he loves food. And it triggered in me a little bit of a flashback. In the fall of 2006, Allan and Dennis and I went barnstorming it was the Voyage of the Damned. It was the hopeless. We went to help Ken Blackwell in Ohio, and we went on to help Rick Santorum in Philadelphia, and these are guys we love. And so we fly in a little jet that was loaned to us to use. Thank you, Edward. And so we flew around in this jet, and the weather in Philadelphia was the worst weather I have ever flown in on. And Dennis, as you heard mentioned, does not lack for self-esteem, especially when it comes to technology. So he has a great belief, and the weather's getting worse and worse, and we're trying to get away from this event. And the plane is waiting for us because we got to go to Cleveland to do an event for Ken Blackwell. We're there with Rick Santorum. And so the storms are coming in, and they will fly in any weather. These are former Air Force guys. And Dennis insists on bringing along his Garmin. Now, I don't know what year he was born in, but Garmins don't work around skyscrapers. And so he kept trying to and there's one highway in and out of Philadelphia anyway. You could just turn right and end up at the airport. But Dennis wants to make this work. So we're driving, Alan, you remember that. We're driving around Philadelphia like a NASCAR lap, and it's getting later and later and later. And Dennis is more concerned with making the Garmin work until we get to the plane. So we're hopelessly late, and by this time the wind is blowing and I'm getting on the plane behind Dennis, and I'm thinking, this is Salem Radio's La Bamba moment. I did. I said, Michael Medved's going to be doing 9 hours of radio for the rest of his life. Do the shift before and the shift after. And so we get on. It's not very encouraging. And Al and I are kind of white-knuckle. This is kind of white-knuckle. And the co-pilot says, don't worry, I think we'll be fine. Not what you want to hear, right? Don't worry, I think it'll be fine. And it's a good-sized plane, but nevertheless, you're kind of cramped in there. And Dennis was bigger than he is now at that time. And he's a big man to begin with. So we strap in, and I didn't even hear the pilot mention it. But the pilot mentioned that there was a tray of cold cuts in the plane. And so we take off, and this plane's up and down and all around, and white-knuckling it. And in the middle of this, Dennis decides he's going to get up and look for the cold cuts. We're flying to our death, and what's going to be the lead headline all over the United States the next day. And Dennis is pulling out the drawers, and he takes his seatbelt off, and then he knocks on the cabin door for the pilot and says, are there cold cuts back here? Dennis, sit down, we're going to die. He's moving the plane around like that. But it's because he is absolutely, completely fearless. Close on a good note. That's a great thing in a radio host, because he speaks truth. Whatever he says, he speaks the truth into the radio. It's a great thing. I can only compare my friendship with Dennis. I'm from Ohio.
It's like a toboggan ride down a very snowy, very steep hill. You have no idea where you're going. You cannot steer it. You have no idea where you're going to end up, but it is enormously great fun to have a conversation, and it's one of my great honors to always be able to open up and say, my friend Dennis Prager. Dennis, good to be here tonight.
All right, two very quick comments. The hour is late, and then one final roaster, I guess. Hugh mentioned that he's a member of the Presbyterian Church, and people sometimes refer to Jewish people as the chosen people. Aren't Presbyterians are the frozen chosen, right? Isn't that the... goes along with the toboggan run. And speaking of Dennis's ability to sell and Dennis's passion for food, they intersected in a peculiar way. I first met Dennis and got to know Dennis and Joseph at the same time because I was brought, and we were all shockingly young. I mean, literally, we were all in our 20s, early 20s. And Dennis was this boy wonder, head of a Jewish retreat center, Jewish educational center, the Brandeis Bardeen Institute, which many of you know. And Joseph was education director. And they ran this place, and it was the most exciting, one of the most exciting Jewish substantive places in the world when these two guys ran it. It really was. And I was brought out there as a scholar in residence because I had my first book, which was fortunate enough to be a bestseller, and it turned out that we had just a great deal in common. I mean, one of the things when you are a geek about classical music, but not a musician, you see, but you're still a geek about classical music, to find somebody else to talk to about that is just fun. And this is before Dennis had discovered the radio and before I had discovered the radio through Dennis. But we had great interests in common and really struck up what's been for me a very important friendship. And partially because Dennis came from a much more traditionally Orthodox Jewish background than I did. When Dennis began doing radio regularly on KBC, I was, of course, impressed, as I mentioned, particularly with Religion on the Line, but his ability to sell. There was one commercial that Dennis used to do on KBC, which he just didn't do with the proper enthusiasm, and maybe some of you remember it. Farmer John, pure pork, sausage, westernmost in quality, easternmost in flavor. Somehow Dennis delivering the ads for Farmer John pure pork sausage, if you could hear the radio equivalent of somebody handling a commercial with rubber gloves, surgical gloves, holding it out in front of you. And so, Farmer John pure pork, so it was striking. But Dennis survived that. And we all survived that. It has been an amazing journey. Having been aware at the very beginning that Dennis, on the radio, something magic about it. And something magic about the groups of people that he's able to bring together, as you see from all of these roasters, as you see from his wonderful family, and as you will hear from somebody who for a quarter of a century has been enriching all of our lives. It's a bar mitzvah of sorts. Dennis Prager, after 25 years on the radio, today you are a man. Dennis Prager.
Well, First thing is, I survived. I don't get nervous before public events. If I did, I would have long ago had a heart attack. But I need to tell you, with the quality of minds that were roasting me, and their belief that I don't get easily insulted, I knew it was going to be a long evening. It was a terrific evening. I've recorded it we have so many recordings, I will refer to this for the rest of my life. I thank, first of all of you who came here, and in some cases, if from far away, but just to give of their time. It was the deepest honor to me that such people think highly enough to insult me that much in front of so many people. It was half joking and certainly half true. Thank you, all of you. It meant the world to me. These are wonderful people. It really was what I imagined. I did not imagine what they would say, and I have some rebuttals, by the way. I just want you to know, I do. I have some responses that I will share with you. First, though, I'd like to introduce to you the members of my family who are here. And you've heard reference to my parents who made the long trip. By the way, they came from New Jersey via train. The wow is appropriate. They're going back by plane. They have a very good attitude, my parents, who are 89 and 88 respectively, and don't anywhere near act or look it, as you will see in a moment. But it is part of their positive outlook when I asked, so how did you like taking the train cross-country? It's wonderful to try everything once. And I knew they'll be flying back. That was clear. Apparently, as it turns out, there were two routes cross-country. They took the garbage dump route. The southern route apparently goes through waste disposal areas. The northern route goes through the Rockies and so on. So it's too bad they took the southern route. But in any event, they did come, and I'm very glad. You've heard my father on his birthday, July 18th. He will turn 90 this July 18th. As with George Burns, who was booked at 100 in Vegas. You're booked at 100 10 years from now on July 18th. We're trying to get my mother to come on. Yes, tell her. She's afraid I'm going to ask her some arcane political questions. That's why she's not coming on. Like, Ma, what do you think of the North Dakota Senate race? It's not a danger, Ma. It's not a danger. I don't know anything about the North Dakota Senate race. But I would like you to meet my parents, Max and Hilda Prager. Please stand. And I have 3 children, and one is he's broken up that he couldn't come, and he really couldn't come. He has a new job which truly did not allow him. He tried everything, and I know, and I'm not saying this, and David should know, I know he couldn't come. But my other 2 children did come, and I want to introduce them as well. Anya, please stand. And her husband, Larry, whom I feel is a child of mine. Larry, come on, Larry. And my son, Aaron. By the way, he got that from me. See that? That was very cool. So it's a very to have the people I love from my family and so many others of you that you know who you are and I love, and my dear other Allan, where are you, my dear other Allan, who makes my life possible. You heard reference to Allan Breeze. Allan, thank you. And all these people up here, and so many of you, if I started naming, it would just, everybody would want, well, why didn't another name get named? I do want to say a word, though, on behalf of Salem Communications, the people that syndicate me and Hugh and Michael, who are up here. I do believe they have the finest lineup in radio. I don't say it because I work there. I absolutely proudly say it. I would compare this lineup that they have with anyone on radio today. These are classy people who do not believe in putting people down, who believe in elevating conversation in America, whose intellect and backgrounds are so much higher than the opposition. If you hear left-wing radio, and I have no desire to politicize this evening, but I mean, if you would take on hour-per-hour basis, if you would take Hugh and his opposition on the left, or me and my opposition, or Michael and his, or Bill Bennett and his, or Mike Gallagher and his, I mean, there's no comparison. So I am very proud. I'm sorry? I am very proud to be a part of Salem, who have made it possible. That's why I left KABC. I wanted to be affiliated. They didn't fire me. I was perfectly, as George knows, they were perfectly willing to keep me. I was doing rather well there. But this is the place that I call home now for about 9 years, and hope to call home for very many more years. They make it possible for these values and these ideas to go out into the world. The power of our radio astounds me. Barack Obama has made reference to it now on a number of occasions. I read articles, well, if it weren't a professor who was writing on behalf of not condemning anything in the Islamic world, Professor Esposito in Georgetown, wrote, if it weren't for right-wing radio, people would have a very different view of what's happening in the Islamic world. It was just yesterday's paper in the Los Angeles Times. I am very proud. It's better to be a part of an all-star team than to be a star. And I am a member of an all-star team. And I thank Now I want to tell you about what's the name of the pork sausages again? What was the name? Farmer John. Farmer John. I wrote Father John. I knew I wasn't right. Yeah. Very funny. I want to tell you, this actually happened when I was asked to advertise Farmer John pork sausages. I went to an Orthodox rabbi in Los Angeles with this legal question. I'm not Orthodox, but I take Jewish law seriously. And I said, Rabbi, they've asked me to advertise Farmer John pork sausages. Can I? And he said, I'll get back to you. And he got back to me and said, this was you'll love this. He said, yes, but you may not say, good. It's the truth. That was the halachic ruling. So that's why you heard the rubber gloves, as it were. I could certainly sell the product, but I couldn't imply I loved it, because I don't eat pork. And so it was a great ruling. It was classic, and that's how it happened. And I forgot all about it until you reminded me of it. Now let me tell you about Hugh in Philadelphia, since he raised the issue. He does not know this, but this was the most difficult moment I ever had on national radio, and you don't know this. It was in Philadelphia, where we were brought, and I went on your show. Now, I know this is going to get back to Philadelphia, a city I love, the people there I love, the station there is particularly wonderful, WNTP. I could fill the board with just listeners and callers from the Philadelphia area. That's how popular the show is there. I just had 1,000 folks come to a talk in Philadelphia, the University of Pennsylvania, 2 weeks ago. But to be perfectly honest, I don't have anything particular to say about Philadelphia as such. And the first question Hugh throws at me is, Dennis, you know how enthused he is, introvert my buttocks, you know. Please. You listen to him for 3 hours, and the first thing you say is, shy. First thing he goes in his typical Hugh enthusiasm, Dennis, tell us, why do you love Philadelphia? I had no answer. Well, Hugh, who doesn't love Philadelphia? Hugh, I'm going to kill you right after the station break. If you dig up a recording of that hour, you will laugh yourself silly because I just said nothing. I mean, I love people in Philadelphia, but to be honest, I don't know what there is to love that much about it. It's a wonderful, I love the people. So I said, oh, the people, I love the people. What, I love the Liberty Bell? I mean, what am I going to say? Plus, the weather was particularly verkackt, as we say in Yiddish, and it was anyway, it's just, that's another memory that I never shared. Now, was it you who mentioned everybody was Jewish till the Goy? Yeah. So, this is affirmative action, by the way. That's the only... It's the only reason we had Hugh. And so anyway, we have often, you know, it's the opposite often takes place, where Michael and I are the only Jews and everybody else is Christian, like at the Salem conference. Nearly everybody's Christian. So what happened? You guys may remember this. It was in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. I'm on a panel with Bill Bennett and I think Mark Stein, yes, who was Christian, and it was about the terror and foreign policy in the future. And sure enough, Michael is there, of course, as well. And Michael and I start having a sort of debate. And then Bennett takes the microphone and says, there are 2 Jews in the entire room. Everyone is Christian, and they're fighting. Right? Remember that?
And I was right.
Michael just said, and he was right. And it was a classic moment, though, and I realized that Bill Bennett was right. It was so funny. The 2 Jews found each other to differ. And it's not like, I mean, you know, Michael and I, we differ on a handful of issues every so often. You know, he will endorse Ron Paul, and I just feel it. I don't understand, Michael, why you would. Now, let me say a word about my producer. Folks, I have said to people who want to get into talk radio, they say, Dennis, what should I do? I said, well, what you should do is you should go into a room alone and try to be interesting for 3 hours. Right? Because it's hard to talk to a wall and be interesting. It is harder to look at Allan and be interesting. I get the last word. I love it. This is awesome. See, Allan has delayed responses. I will say something I think is really good, and nothing. And then about 30 seconds later, that was good. Or that was funny. Most of us really laugh when we hear something funny. Allan announces it was funny. It's like a weather report, sort of, you know? So I just want you to know the challenges that, and by the way, that was cheating with the singing. That was not on air. That was what I did to entertain Sean.
You said I couldn't cheat.
Oh. Did you hear his answer? Who said I couldn't cheat? That's a good point. It's a valid point. But I want you to know that ridiculous singing was off air. And I often say, you folks often say to me when you meet me, you know, I feel like I know you. You do. The only aspect of me you don't fully know is goofy. I'm goofy most of the time, except on air. I mean, it's hard to be goofy about terror, you know, recessions. I mean, we're not given the meat with which to be all that goofy. Now, I am surprised that Bruce did not mention more about our sojourn in Moscow together. We spent 10 days together. I will say this is the God's honest truth. Outside of my last 3 years of high school, when I laughed for 3 years, I have not laughed as much as I did with Bruce those 10 days in Moscow. The reason is there was nothing else to do. Is that fair? See, you don't understand. What people did not understand, the chief feature of communism, outside of oppression, was boredom. Is that not right? No, that was my field of study. Bruce heard me give, I led a Seder at the U.S. Embassy in Russian. It was one of the great honors of my life, and Bruce was there. That was my field of study. Communism made society boring. Nothing happened. So this was still, while it was the death throes of communism, it was still communist Moscow. There was nothing to do, so we sat all day. It's hard for me to believe we did this. We sat for about 6 hours a day at the bar. And remember, I don't drink alcohol, not out of conviction, but because I like to stay standing. That's all. And so we would drink orange juice at some ridiculously high price per glass, which I will talk about in a moment. One of the great achievements of my life, I'll say it in a moment. And we would watch. This is hard to believe. I'm telling you the truth. He can vouch for it. There was a giant cuckoo clock. Giant. I mean, 3 times larger than myself. In the lobby. And we would watch them dance. We would watch the characters go around every hour. Right? It was a highlight. It was a highlight of our trip. Anyway, I don't know why, we just made each other laugh, but my great achievement, and to this day, I don't know if Bruce realized this, but he must, because he's rather bright. He paid for every single drink for 10 days. This was a major achievement in my life where I would say, oh, Bruce, sorry, Bruce, you want to just handle this one, Bruce? And every time he paid. I owe you a fortune. Orange juice, they didn't have oranges under communism, and it was expensive. But that was one of the highlights of my life. And Joseph has correctly noted how we would have differently written a book. Joseph's version of the 9 questions people ask about Judaism would have been 9 volumes people asked about Judaism, all of which would have been many stories, and another good line and another good anecdote. I have known Joseph since high school, and I loved his late parents. I loved them very much. And I will never forget, though, I was more, shall we say, Americanized than his parents. And I'll never forget Joseph's mother's reaction when we first met. She said to him, Joseph reported this to me later, she of course didn't do it in front of me, he's very charming, but is he deep? Is that right? Was that what the words?
Yeah, along those lines.
Along those lines, yeah. she couldn't, it was a fascinating thing. We came from different backgrounds in other ways too. I am Mr. Enthusiast and, conquer the world and so on, certainly in high school. And I said, Joseph, we're going to write an introduction to Judaism, as if 700 hadn't been written, but we're going to do it better. And of course, that was his mother's reaction. Joseph, 700 have been written. Why will you do that? But mothers have this way of sobering their sons. My mother may not recall this, but this was the first roast of me when I was starting to get paid for lectures. My mother looked at me one day and said, I can hear you for free and I don't listen. What are you clapping about? What are you going to do? That was quite a moment. Yes. Steve Marmer comes on the show on the Happiness Hour, and he's a great psychiatrist. He really is. And it's a good thing we talk about the subject in advance, because Allan and I will talk to him and say, so Steve, you have any topics in mind? And, and he'll say, sure, And then he'll pick out something from the most esoteric aspect of psychiatry, like, Dennis, let's talk about the impact of, athlete's foot on the adolescent psyche. And I go, Steve, I don't think it's going to fly. Steve, something more popular. He does. He has this great list, and Allan and I, who love him, we look at each other and go, Steve, it's radio. It is not the UCLA psychology class or psychiatry class, because he's a professor too. So this is how we work through the topic with Steve. I don't even know why I ask him for suggestions. I never use them. It's a form of humoring. George Hiltzik is a total character. But I will say this about George Hiltzik, and this is the truth. Wherever he has negotiated on my behalf, nothing good has happened. But the people he negotiates with all tell me how they like him. Forgive me, but I don't give a crap. Everywhere I've gone, Dennis, we normally can't stand agents. We really like George. So what? So what? Oh, that's good. I didn't get another nickel, but hey, they like my agent. That's great. That's great. That's very helpful. Michael Medved will say things. Michael is on a crusade to distinguish himself from the rest of the rabble on talk radio. And I get more email. I get more email with, Dennis, have Michael on your show and debate him, than I do with left-wingers. It's wonderful, and we do. And you come on my show, we debate, and we end up, not disagreeing nearly as much as we thought anyway. He's wonderful at what he does. I call it the Medvedian memory. This is the truth. You remember, we were together, and I wanted to demonstrate as a joke, though, as a total joke to people, how much knowledge of American history he had. I said, hey, Michael, so who was the Secretary of Agriculture under Woodrow Wilson? He knew. He didn't even know only the guy's name. He could tell you about him. Remember that?
Yeah, but it was Harding.
It was Harding. Oh, I was sorry. There you go, there you go, that's right. So this is a great, it is a great crowd up here. Is there anything else that I wanted to? Oh, let me tell you the basketball story. They all got it wrong. It's bad enough, the truth, so let me tell it to you. It happened, it's both worse and not as bad as you heard, but this is actually what happened. It was in Madison Square Garden, which makes the thing much worse. Right before a New York Knicks game, and every year there is a Jewish basketball league in New York City. So my Yeshiva Flatbush team, the year before, ended up in either first or second place, and the league is rewarded with one game at Madison Square Garden before a Knicks game for the top two teams in the MJHSL, Metropolitan Jewish High School League of New York. So my team got in. The problem with my team was the entire starting team had graduated. We were the worst team in the Yeshiva Flatbush history, which is the only reason I got on the team. You have to understand, I was 6'4" in high school. There are no 6'4" Jews. There aren't. That's why I was put on the team. So long as I wasn't in a wheelchair, I would make that team. Mind you, I don't like basketball. I'm not good at basketball. I'm not interested in basketball. My father wanted me to be on the basketball team, and the coach looked at the team. I will never forget this, and I really do know how to take it. I'll never forget. The coach, who was somewhat of a misanthrope, looked at the team when the final cuts were made and said, "Boys, Flatbush is going to lose bad this year. We really scraped the bottom of the barrel. Prager made the team." By the way, this gives you an insight into me. I give you my word. This was I remember my internal reaction. He's right. I wasn't hurt at all. I was not in any way hurt. He was entirely accurate. They did scrape the bottom of the barrel to have me on the team, but I was so tall for a Jew, what are they going to do? So we got into Madison Square Garden having nothing to do with that team, but the last year's team that graduated. So I was sitting on the bench, and all I did on the bench, this is me, was I made believe I was announcing the game and making jokes. And I kept my friend Isaac Knackbar, who we called Snack Bar, I kept, remember Snack Bar? So I kept Snack Bar laughing the whole game. And I was totally happy to make jokes and be funny on the bench, certain I would never be put in. However, you know, as the Yiddish saying goes, man plans and God laughs. With 58 seconds to go, it was mathematically impossible for Flatbush to win. I got put in. I look at Snack Bar. I'm slightly panicked. The Madison Square Garden is starting to fill up because the Knicks are going to come on next. And I go, I give you my word of honor, my friends. I go, Snack Bar, where are we shooting? If there is a hell, Snack Bar is going there. No. I'm going to tell you why. Snack Bar looks at me and just laughs. I promise this is all true. To make things worse, first of all, because I was Dennis the Man, I took number 13. Okay? I hear over the Madison Square Garden public address system, and now coming in for Flatbush, number 13, Stanley Prager. Nothing was going right. Nothing. So I go on the court. I'm really unbelievably nervous because I still don't know which direction Flatbush goes toward. Now, this is pathetic, I admit it, but please understand I have no interest in basketball. I was on the team because of him and my height. Okay? Please understand that. Now, at a jump ball, it's very hard to know where either team is going because there are guys on both sides, right? So there was a jump ball, and I still didn't know. Now, here's where they embellished it. I never had possession of the ball. Never. But I did run to the wrong side. And as long as I live, I will never forget the referee on that side looked at me and said, "Kid, are you some sort of schmuck?" Now, here's the thing. I give you my word, my only reaction was, he's right. What the hell am I doing alone with the referee? Why did I not ever have possession of the ball? I have another reason. In my mind, so again, I put all my credibility on the line here that this is true. In my mind, I remember I had two admonitions. Dennis, look busy, but do not go near ball. If there were a video of me, and I would pay anything to have a video of those 58 seconds. You would see me doing this. Which is all the more remarkable now that I think of it, we were on offense. I did everything wrong, everything possible wrong, but I did not, it is not true that I shot at the wrong basket. I really needed to make that clear. It's very good to have humbling experiences in life, and I had my share. That certainly was one of them. It's true, Joseph graduated 93rd, and I graduated, I graduated 93rd, you graduated you were 83rd, I was 92nd. And who made the joke about the D class? That is the truth. The school was stratified into A, B, C, and D classes, and I was in the D class. And it was, no, that's not true. There were another 20 kids also. I had no desire to go to the C class, but I was put in it, and sure enough, that's where I met Joseph, who had been demoted from the B class. Now, Hugh Hewitt, that cold cut story is totally apocryphal. I knocked on the cockpit door for cold cuts? I mean, it's an impressive story. I'm not trying to deny it. I think. All right, fine. All right, very good. Okay. Well, okay, now let me be serious for a moment and then let you go home. There's a couple of things I want to say about me and radio, and that's it. When I was a junior in high school, I kept a diary. I wish I'd kept one ever since. One of the handful of times I have envy is that I envy that Allan has kept a diary every day for how many years? 28. 28 years. I mean, he has recorded the day we met. Met this tall, bombastic. Anyway, I wish that I had kept one, but I did in my last years of high school. And I wrote, I know my life's purpose. I want to influence people to the good. And I have never wavered a day. I don't take any credit for it. I don't. It's just what was implanted in me. And in fact, not only don't take credit, I am incredibly lucky that I had a sense of purpose so early in my life. But that's all I ever wanted to do, and if there was a vehicle through smoke signals, I would use smoke signals, or whatever medium would be available. I am blessed beyond words that I could try to do some good with the incredible power of a radio show. There's really nothing parallel to it. There really isn't. Television entertains, but it doesn't influence. It's a very different medium. I've been on both. And here's the proof, which I've often noted. A friend of mine went on a book tour, his first, and he said it was fascinating. Whenever he was on radio, his friends would react to what he said. And whenever he was on television, they react to how he looked. And that's why you get all these pretty talk newscasters. It doesn't matter if you're pretty or handsome, which is why some of us are in the business in radio, but it doesn't matter in radio. The ear is a far deeper organ than the eye. And so to be given 3 hours a day in whatever number of markets, 100 plus, is a blessing. There is no day that I do not think how blessed I am to be able to do that. But I have learned something that I didn't know until a few years ago, which I'll share with you, because I have found that though it's challenging, being transparent has a lot of power. The more you know about someone, the more you trust them. So I will be personal for a moment. I always believed that I was having an impact with ideas. I knew that. I got feedback. People would think in terms of good and evil more. A lot of people, someone came over to me tonight and said, thanks to you, I'm a much better Christian. And people find that almost ironic. Well, here's a Jew and making Christians better Christians. I am thrilled by that fact. It brings me incredible joy. And indeed, Jews who were better Jews, and that too, obviously, brings me great joy. But I didn't know something until, and here I really am being very open with you and with my children present, when I announced a few years ago that I was getting divorced after 17 years, the most painful thing in my life by far. I mean, there was nothing comes second close. There's no second place. And I announced it, and I received nearly 1,000 emails. And they were in 998 of them were something like this. Dear Dennis, when I heard your announcement, I pulled over to the side of the road and cried. I didn't understand that. It really didn't, it threw me for a loop. I mean, I understand that people would feel bad or a little sad or empathize. I didn't, the level, what I discovered, and it was a discovery, was that I was part of a lot of people's lives. I wasn't only a source of good values and good ideas. I never thought of that. I never even aimed for it. And I don't even know what to do with it, to be perfectly. I'm reporting it to you as an observation of my life, but I really, to this day, I don't know what to do with it. I know it's true, and I'm not saying there is anything to be done with it. But it made me aware of a level of involvement that is not ordinary, that is not even normal. The reactions to my own life in people's lives. And it touched me, obviously. It changed me. It changed my perception. It didn't change my show. I still think secondhand smoke isn't terribly dangerous, and that's a position I retain just to make sure people don't love me too much, because people are certain I'm nuts on that. But of course, it's not going to change what I do. But it did impact me, and I see it when I talk to people. And there's something that I'm also very touched by, if I may say this, is that I have been given another gift to be able to be a bridge between Jews and Christians. This is a blessing, and it's all, I actually attribute it all to my 10 years on Religion on the Line. That show changed me as much as it changed any listener. This was a yeshiva boy from Brooklyn. My God, I didn't meet a Christian till college. Brooklyn, New York, Orthodox Jewish life. I didn't meet a Reformed Jew till college. I met all sorts of Orthodox Jews. That was the eclectic nature of the world in which I lived. Many people have provincial worlds. My parents were not provincial, but the world in which I lived was. And here I am given a show with priests, rabbis, ministers, different religion each week. And I really fell in love with many of the Christian clergy. It had a real impact, and they knew it. And the Christian listeners knew it. And the Jewish listeners knew it, and the Jews trusted me from all my Jewish work. And now Christians were trusting this Jew because he obviously didn't have any agenda. I mean, my predecessor had an agenda to make religion look silly. She would ask priests if the Pope engages in autoerotic activity. And she didn't put it as delicately as I just did. I mean, I would never think to ask that of a priest. It's a disgusting question. And this, over time, came to the point where two communities that didn't always interrelate, to a certain extent, had somebody they both trusted who did love both communities. And it's a blessing. When James Dobson and Focus on the Family had their 25th anniversary a couple of years ago, they invited a Catholic, a Protestant, and a Jew, and I was the Jew that they invited. That was a very powerful statement to me. And the fact that I work for beautiful Christians, and Michael, of course, we both work for these Christians whom we adore, is one of those only in America is this possible moments. I had an only in America moment 2 weeks ago. I was invited to the American Atheists annual convention in Minneapolis, needless to say, on Easter Sunday, to debate them on God's existence. And I opened up and I said, only in America will a religious Jew wish an atheist convention a happy Easter. And I have come in the course of my radio work to appreciate what Christians made in this country, the Judeo-Christian country in which we live, to love it, to venerate it, and to say if there is an endangered species to worry about, it is not some obscure frog. It is the United States of America as a Judeo-Christian country. That is an endangered species, and that worries me. And so all of this I learned through you and your reactions and this work and my colleagues, and it has been the richest 25 years a man can ask for. Thank you all very much. Joe.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. The broadcast day begins tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., Bill Bennett's Morning in America. And thank you for what you do for this greatest nation on God's green earth.